So once you understand where your value is, where you create value for your customers, because that's where you're going to capture values, that's how you're going to generate profit, then you focus on that. But again, it goes back to understanding where is the real value. The value of LightPath, the real value of LightPath wasn't in the technology of making a lens, it was in enabling the end application. And once we started focusing on that, we realized, well, we can become much more than just a lens company.
Welcome to Manufacturing Insiders. Today I have a great guest with me, Sam Rubin. He is the CEO of LightPath, which is a publicly traded company. He was brought in to really turn around the company right after COVID, and he's done a great job and really kind of transitioned them from component manufacturer in the infrared and night vision sector and transformed them more into a assembly and full completed product company. I hope that I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah.
But
Sam,
welcome to Manufacturing Insiders. Excited to have the conversation today.
Absolutely. Good to be here, Nate.
Great. So just a little bit about your history. So I believe you have about 25 years in the optics space, and you've had a lot of experience turning around companies and growing companies, yes?
Yeah, I'm embarrassed to say it's more like 30 years, but I like to think of myself as a 40-year-old still, so I'll go with 25.
Okay.
Yeah, but I spent my whole career really in optics and started on the engineering side, but always had some entrepreneurship in me. And at some point when I was at Four Labs, which is a pretty big company now, $750 million or so dollars, I got to do a lot of turnaround and fixing and sort of fell in love with that part. I guess I'm always been a big change driver and love, changing things for the better, of course, hopefully for the better. And turnaround and fixing is really a lot about that. So fit in nicely with that.
Yeah, and I know a lot of different CEOs and leaders have kind of different things that they focus on when it comes to turnaround. Sometimes you have the efficiency, you got the lean guys, and then you've got the people guys. Let's get the right leadership in place. And most people incorporate a combination, but is there like a factor that you find to be the most important in a company turnaround?
Well, first of all, any turnaround always includes all of those, right? One level of another, right? And depends on the situation. Sometimes you will come into an incredible team and you really don't need to worry about that part too much. It doesn't mean that it's not part of the turnaround, but if you're dealt a good hand and a great team, that's not the driver there. I tend to focus on my technological area always, right? So I'm always around optics and photonics. And therefore, by nature, it turns out to be very innovation or technology driven.
Right.
And so almost always when I do a turnaround or when I come into a company, I have a very significant effort around the product and offering of the company.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, this is a technological field. Photonics, optics is really, it's an enabling technology, if you would, right? So the power of optics is in what it enables other industries to do, right? So, optics enables your iPhone camera to, be a great camera and to be more than just a phone. Optics enable your wireless mouse to work as a pointing device and so on. So when you think about it, and at the end of the day, you always have to understand what value you create, right? Because everything is around that. The value that optics creates is enabling other industries, enabling other applications to do something, either do it completely, which it couldn't be done before, or just do it better and faster. And so once you understand where your value is, where you create value for your customers, because that's where you're going to capture values, that's how you're going to generate profit, then you focus on that. And in my world, that tends to be typically around the technology and around sort of enabling to do more things with the same technology.
I see. So when you came into the company, did you feel like their understanding of that value to the market was misaligned?
Yeah, so LightPath apps, it was very much so. So the reason is not completely just the company, the reason is also a change in the industry. And so optics 20, 30 years ago was a very niche technology, okay? You didn't see it anywhere where you're seeing it today. I mean, a webcam 30 years ago was this probably massive video
Right.
camera, camcorder or something like that. And now all of that changed. So along the lines, when optics got adopted into more and more industries, the whole supply chain, value chain of the technology changed. And 20 years ago, 30 years ago, LightPath, LightPath's customers were optics companies, were companies like, if you would, Lockheed Martin or FLIR or Kodak, companies that optics was a core part of what they do, and so they designed the entire systems. And all they needed a company like LightPath to do is just make the individual lenses. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why, it's not only LightPath. 20 years ago, there might have been 1,000 companies in the US that were making lenses. Might be an exaggeration, but hundreds of companies. And now
Right.
there are a handful. So the reason is the more optics got adopted into more places, the more customers wanted a complete solution and not
Mm.
just individual components.
Yes.
Lightpath failed to realize that beforehand, and that's really the change we've been doing. We've been saying, okay, we have all this great technology. Instead of taking it and just making lenses for someone else to build a camera from, we will build a camera. And if you would, instead of selling glass, we're now selling pixels. We're selling images because we're selling imaging capabilities. So, this change where now companies that build drones don't want to build the whole camera system themselves. They just want to plug it in. Companies that are integrated in optics into a flow cytometer, for example, don't want to design the entire thing. They want to buy an optical engine and so on. So that created the opportunity for LightPath to step up and do that. But again, it goes back to understanding where is the real value. The value of LightPath, the real value of LightPath wasn't in the technology of making a lens, it was in enabling the end application. And once we started focusing on that, we realized, well, we can become much more than just a lens company.
Mm-hmm.
And now, probably more than 50% of our business, we've nearly doubled since then, and more than 50% of our business is systems, is solutions, and
Wow.
not the lenses.
When did it get to that 50% number?
We started the transition 5 years ago in 2020. Of course, it was during COVID, so that was a whole
Whole
set by
story.
itself of challenges. It took about 2 years just to clean up operational stuff in the company. There were a
Mm.
lot of problems globally. There was a lot of waste. We had to really, button things up and sort those out before we can even start going down a path of change. And about 2 or 3 years later, we started taking baby steps. We started doing optical assemblies, saying to a customer, okay, you're buying from us 5 lenses. What are you doing with them? You're putting them together to make a assembly, a zoom lens.
Mm-hmm.
Let us do the assembly for you, or let us design it for you and do it for you. And that got us to probably about 20%. Then we started making cameras, but then to really make big leaps there and for it not to take 10 years to develop an entire portfolio, we started acquisitions. So we acquired Visimid Technologies that does one type of infrared cameras. It's uncooled
Mm.
cameras.
Okay.
We acquired G5 Infrared that does another type of cameras. Those are cooled cameras for long range detection. So two very complementary products.
Mm-hmm.
All of them are based on the technology of LightPath in glass, in optics, in optical assembly. So it's really
Right.
very synergistic. But instead of developing an entire product line, which would take 5 years
Sure.
plus, you buy it in. So it's very natural for a company to do that once you're already set in a strategic direction.
I see. So in those were those acquisitions, or at least some of those within the last year?
So Visimid was about 2 years ago, almost to date,
Okay.
and G5 Infrared was half a year ago.
Okay. Yeah, because I noticed that your capital expenditures were up about, what, 34% year over year. And I was wondering if that was because
Yeah,
you're
so,
buying
so
equipment
part
to
of
do
it
these.
was investing in changing the footprint. So historically, the company, when it was a component company, was very focused on low-cost manufacturing and low-cost manufacturing for industrial applications, commercial and industrial. And that naturally led to China. So when I joined 5 years ago, the vast majority of manufacturing was in China. And China was even 35% of our revenue because we were selling to OEMs, to original equipment manufacturers that would buy individual lenses from us.
Right.
Once we started shifting with that to more value-added assemblies and systems, naturally those are done in the US more. And the sales end up in the US. China is now less than 5% of our business. And, most of our business is now defense and US oriented. So we've made some very large investments in the US. We tripled our footprint here. We bought manufacturing in. Most of the company altogether is in the US at this point, both in terms of revenue and people. The largest manufacturing operation is now here in Florida, where before it was in China. So we're a very, very different company, and that requires CapEx for sure.
For sure, yeah, and I mean it definitely took some foresight, I would imagine, to make the decision because you're increasing your cost for production by doing it in the U.S., but now you appear to be positioned very well compared to some of your competitors because of the political environment, geopolitical environment.
Yeah, so some of it was luck, some of it was foresight. I
Yep.
wish they could take credit for
As
everything.
are all things, right?
Yeah, that's fine, but I'll gladly take the credit. The reality is that it's really stars aligned in multiple ways. So geopolitics really drove Chinese customers to stop buying from us, regardless. And so we started looking for other avenues, and those tended to be more US. We had a feeling that the whole situation with critical minerals like germanium and gallium is going to come to a blow at some point.
Yep.
And we had already a core technology of infrared glass that replaces those materials. We just, doubled down on that and invested much more heavily. We went out and we licensed some additional technology for that. And we made investments, and some of the investments were made actually by the government that said, we found partners inside the government that understood already, 4 years ago that it's time to start building up manufacturing in the US again. And so, there was a lot of good things that aligned. Then it also happened to be that our operation in China had fraud going on. So it sort of incentivized me even more to, reduce that one and move back to the US. So, but everything seems to have worked out really well now for that.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, and so the material that you mentioned, so the glass is characterized as what? Chalcogenic.
To simplify it, we call it black diamond. So we trademarked black diamond as a name. And then no one needs to break their teeth trying to understand any chemical compositions like that.
Right. But arsenic and selenium, yes?
That's one of them, yeah. So chalcogenites are actually a family of materials. It's sulfurs and arsenic and selenium and others. And some of the materials we dope it are not even chalcogenites, they're other materials. But that is sort of some of the beauty of it, because historically, glass or crystals that were used in infrared optics, like silicon, germanium, and gallium, those are naturally occurring materials. So the properties that nature gave them are the properties you have. You cannot really change them that much. But once you start making glass is a synthetic material, really. It's a chemical composition. Now you can start tweaking it. And you can add a little bit more of that, a little bit less of that, and play around with that, a bit more scientifically than I'm doing with my hands, but come up with now 20 compositions that are slightly different from each other, but are so complementary to one another.
I see.
So that's the beauty of those materials.
And so the functional beauty of the materials then is the ability to integrate both infrared and night vision into the same lens.
That's
Yes.
definitely one of them. So multispectral imaging, so imaging in multiple infrared bands, if you would, at the same time through one device is a very big part. If you look at any military equipment, but even in the civilian world to some degree, there are different types of infrared cameras. Night vision, as you pointed out, is one. So it's actually an infrared camera. There is then, a camera called shortwave infrared that you can use it to look through clouds, for example, or midwave infrared, which allows you to image for a very long distance, or long waves. That is, different functions for each one of those. Until now, each one of them was a separate camera. So if you look at a turret on a plane, on a big a gimbal at the border, or on a jet or on a drone, you will see multiple cameras there because each one of them serves its own function.
Right.
You couldn't combine them because each one of them uses different wavebands, and that is different types of glass. So germanium works for one, but it doesn't work for the other one. And silicon works for the other one, but not for that one, and so on.
Right.
These materials work for all of those. So all of a sudden, you can now start making cameras that can do more than one function.
Wow.
That reduces the size, the weight, the cost, the power consumption, even on a drone, everything.
Sure.
So that's one big difference. Another big difference is the complexity of the system. Because until now, optical designers had only a handful of materials to use, like germanium and silicon, that had set properties to them. Like, for example, sensitivity to temperature changes. Okay, those materials are very sensitive to temperature changes. So you can take a camera and you can calibrate it to be focused here, okay, in the room. And then I will go out to the desert and it's 30 degrees more, 40 degrees more, and it will be out of focus. Because the glass changes its properties when the temperature changes around. And with germanium and silicon in a very extreme way. So those cameras, now think about it not on a handheld device where I can just focus it. Think you put a drone on a camera on a drone, and the drone is now in the desert at 120 degrees. But then, night comes and the temperature changes drastically and drops. You're not going to, go up there to the drone to refocus it. You need to add a motor or an engine or something that would move it and refocus it. So these materials can be insensitive to temperature changes. So you can now build a system that does not need to be refocused when the temperature changes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So think of drones that go through temperature cycles like that. A satellite, which during the daytime is baking in the sun, and during nighttime is freezing in cold space. All those systems are extremely sensitive to temperature change today. And our new materials solve those.
That's phenomenal. So, with the drone application, which, based on the Ukraine-Russia war, I'm making the assumption that drone warfare is the future of warfare. What percentage of drones currently produced for defense applications utilize this technology?
So I'm not a war tactician or strategist to be able to say, drones are the future or not. They definitely seem to be playing a much bigger role today, of course, as a new technology. But our materials are very new. I mean, we're just now starting to roll them out. So we're already making cameras that are using those materials. 2 weeks ago, we actually announced 2 new long-range zoom cameras that are using our materials and therefore completely germanium-free. So this is, as far as I know, the first in the industry to have that. So all other cameras are still using a lot of germanium and are still, using inventories of germanium that exist in the West or finding some ways to get sources of germanium.
So
But for
that's
us,
the
we're
other big
solving
advantage.
that.
I'm sorry for interrupting you there, but that's the other big advantage that you mentioned before was germanium. We have to source that from countries we really don't want to be sourcing materials from, whereas
Correct.
these materials are available here. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So now it's even worse, right? Before is we were sourcing it from countries we didn't want to source it. Now those countries won't even sell it to us.
Mm.
So China stopped selling germanium to the US 8 months ago. Now there were pretty significant inventories of the US, and everyone was going through them and using them. But at the same time, everyone or a lot have been working with us to redesign their systems to now replace germanium with our materials.
Wow. So based on my research, it does appear as if there are other companies in the optics space that are using, I guess, comparable products to Black Diamond. How
Yeah,
comparable are they, and how do we compare those?
yeah. So Black Diamond is a family of products. Two of them are generic products that
Okay.
their formulation is publicly known,
Mm,
and there are at least two other companies that make those products as well.
I see.
All other materials in our Black Diamond family we own exclusively, and we
Mm,
do not publish the formulation for those,
mm.
and
And so
therefore they're only ours. Yeah,
and so those proprietary compositions are what's in that new long range.
exactly.
Okay.
So the proprietary compositions are the ones that solve the problems of temperature and calibration and focus of cameras. And those are under an exclusive license from the government. They were developed at naval research laboratories some years ago, and we have an exclusive license to them. And we've been, working to commercialize them. And those are the really, game changer, if you would, in performance of systems. The other two, what we call BD6 and BD2, are very generic, exist. There's another German company that makes them, for example, um, and are comparable. The materials that the German company makes and what we make in terms of BD6 are very similar to one another. But the only difference is we're a US company, we make it completely in the US,
Yep.
and we're fully qualified by Department of Defense.
Phenomenal. Man, you're making me want to jump off this and go buy some LightPath stock.
Well, you should. You
Yeah,
should.
I will.
Price went down for the last 2 days.
I
Good time
noticed
to
that.
buy
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
pretty big drop, and I couldn't really track down any sort of really good reason for it. But
Oh, the microcaps have been hammered. Defense and microcaps have been hammered for the last 2 days.
yep, yeah, which to me is a buy opportunity
Yep.
across the
Yep.
board. Um, yeah, so and then I guess if we're going to talk more about the stock, the negative EPS, could be a little bit of a red flag for somebody. Like, how do you rationalize that, and what's your outlook
Well,
for that?
first of all, we're a growth company, so we're more focused on gaining market share and growing right now than on generating profit for dividends or anything like that. I mean, if there's a time and place for everything, and there's the right thing to do at the right time. Right now, our focus is top line and aggressive growth and market share.
Mm-hmm.
With it will come, already is coming, the cash flow, and will come the profitability later on.
Yep.
But it's not. I don't think people buy our stock because they think, oh, these guys are going to generate for me $1 a year in terms of profit, so I can spend $5 on a share, and within a year I'll get $1 back in profit, right?
Yep.
They're buying us because they see, okay, this company was $30 million for a long time in revenue, is now going to be 50 to 60 million, is next year maybe 100 million or whatever. I'm not guiding or giving any numbers. I'm just
Right.
implying how people might look at it. And
Mm-hmm.
they say, okay, that's what I'm buying. I'm buying the exponential growth
Yep.
and what the company will deliver down the road.
Right. Which, I mean, I can imagine if I don't know how many of these systems that you'll be replacing with this new long range camera, but if the number is big, it makes no sense why they would replace them with old technology that utilizes hard to procure substances that have less performance when you could replace it with a LightPath.
The numbers are very big, to a
Yeah.
point of, if you look at one application alone, border patrol, up until a few months ago, they were talking about putting a few tens of new towers and cameras along the southern border. Then it went up to 300. Now they're talking about more than 1,000 new towers. And our, cameras that go in there are hundreds of thousands of dollars a piece. So not too difficult to make the math there in terms of what it could be. Another one is next generation Stinger missile. So
Okay.
we make a camera that goes inside that missile. If we go into production, for us it will be somewhere between $50 to $100 million a year in revenue.
Mm-hmm.
That doubles the size of the company,
Right.
pretty much. So there's big money. I mean, that's the difference between selling lenses for $30 a lens and selling cameras for $30,000 a camera, or
Right.
$300,000. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and with the Stinger missile, I mean, that's obviously a disposable application. So,
exactly.
if you can use less cameras on that Stinger missile, that's a huge advantage too.
Yep, exactly.
Phenomenal. No, that's awesome. So tell me about the experience of getting into this company, and what's the first thing you do as a new CEO? You realize that this company has some dysfunction. There's some things that need cleaned up. What do you do? Sit down with the management team and learn everything?
You first of all listen. So I have a pretty much standard way of approaching this, and that is, on my first day, I would email all senior management, all key people, offering a one-on-one meeting. But in the meeting, I tell them already ahead of time, I'm going to be asking you a few questions. And those questions are, describe to me what you do, describe to me how you see what the company does, what do you like about what you do, what don't you like, and what would you really want to see changed in the company. Okay? You do that with 10 people, you're much smarter. You do that with 20 people, you get an incredible understanding of what's really happening and what's really going on. And so you start from that.
Out of the responses that you got, was there some consistency in them, and what did you find surprising about some of those answers?
So in different companies, it was different things. So I won't talk about LightPath specifically, but one company before that I did, the answers across the board were, we don't have a cohesive product offering. We've been doing a lot of development work, but very few products came out of that. And therefore, we're not really generating the revenue out of all the work we did in the last 5 years. And then when I started digging in, I realized that, the company had maybe 5 products, but actually developed another 20 that it just never saw all the way through into production for various reasons.
Federal R&D tax credits.
So you focus down on that, and you start tackling the most painful points first, right? And very quickly you also start to get a feel to the vibe and to what's broken and where it's broken. And many times there's, one or two processes that are broken or never set up correctly, and fixing them alleviates an enormous burden from many people. And that process can be the new product introduction process. So it could be quoting process or order confirmation process. And you realize that, you start digging into that and you find, oh my God, my production management team is spending half of their time just on quoting lead times on orders that are on quotes that are never going to turn into orders. Well, okay, so something is wrong there. You fix that, you've instantly released, half of the capacity of your production planning team.
Right.
They're grateful. They can focus on the important things, and you can move on to the next thing. So you asked at the beginning, what do I focus on in a turnaround, and where I find that I move my chair around, literally. So I sit with different groups at first. And what I do is I find I move it from one to another and to another area until I fix that one, and then I move to another area and fix that one. And I actually had a very funny story with that once, where there was one area of the company that worked really well. Ladies there, managed it exceptionally well. Like, I didn't need to do anything. And she saw me going through and working with each department, but with her not. And she assumed that I thought, that I don't like her, or I think she's really dysfunctional and I'm not working with her, and took it really badly until, she came and we talked about it, and it came up, and I explained to her, this is, Flaw, the exact opposite of what you're thinking. You're doing such an exceptional work, you don't need me near you.
Right.
So I'm focusing it where it's broken, pieces that need me, people that need my attention.
Right.
But it just dawned on me that, unless you communicate clearly, people build their own assumptions around certain events and certain things, and you really have to control the narrative.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great story, and it definitely illustrates, the point of not only just focusing on where the problems are, but also communicating exactly what you're doing to people, so that they don't take it the wrong way, right? So tell me about the acquisitions. Maybe the recent acquisition. It's obviously a very intelligent way to vertically integrate and to take on the product development role in addition to the components. How do you merge those? I would assume they have different CRMs, ERPs, different processes. How do you put all of that together?
So, before any of that, I think it's really important to acknowledge that the number one reason that mergers don't work or acquisitions fail is culture. That is the number one reason that it happens. Okay? There's a lot written about it in different Harvard HBR, in Harvard Business Review, and MIT, and whatnot, but that is it. So we always are working on some acquisitions. We have a pipeline, we have companies we talk to, we have companies we're thinking about. We always make sure that the teams find a way to interact not related to the acquisition at all, or to the prospect of an acquisition. So now, most times it's easy because the companies we're buying, or we're looking at buying, or already in our industry, so we most likely already work together. But if we don't work closely enough together, we make up sometimes projects, because that is the only way to gauge, that I can think of, to gauge cultural fit in an unbiased way before you even start due diligence. And so any acquisitions that we have done and any acquisitions that we're going to do typically involved some significant engagement between the teams ahead of time, unrelated to the acquisition.
Can you describe one of those projects? How does that work?
So we wanted to acquire Visimid Technologies. Visimid has a great technology of a video engine, FPGA-based video engine for infrared cameras. So it does a lot of the image processing and such.
Okay.
We were already in the process of starting to develop some infrared cameras. And so very naturally, it was very easy to say, okay, let's integrate the Visimid video engine here and build the camera together. And that's how our first Mantis multispectral camera came together. So, it's already an in-depth interaction between the engineers and working together and solving problems and so on. And you very quickly see, okay, when you hit a roadblock, because you are going to hit, are they finger pointing or are they solving it? Are they yelling at each other or are they sitting down? And that's the kind of thing you want to know before you dive into the acquisition, because during due diligence, it's like dating. Everything is going to be rosy. Everyone puts on their best show. It's you're falling in love, so everything looks great. You can't really tell that, but it's sort of like moving in together before you get engaged, kind of thing, right?
Yeah. That so, and I'm trying to picture how this process would work. So, I'm your company. I'm thinking about making an acquisition. I have some preliminary talks with their
Yeah,
leadership and say, hey, we're thinking about doing this acquisition. How do you feel about it? They're like, yeah, we would be open to that. And
yeah.
then you say, okay, here's what I like to do. We're considering integrating our technology into yours.
That
Let's
could be
do a
one
test
way.
project.
Or I could just say to them, let's think together of some project we can do. Let's
Okay.
think of a product we can develop together. At the end of the day, you buy companies because they're accretive to us, not just to bolt on revenue and not just to add, oh, here's a company that will add $20 million in revenue. We're buying a company or we merge with companies that we figure, okay, we have something and they have something that together makes something much bigger, right?
Right.
So start thinking of what that much bigger thing is together. And some of it can happen already informally before you merge together. So, in the case of G5, for example, okay, they design optical systems using materials. They were designing some of our materials into their cameras before we did the acquisition.
Okay.
So we got some interaction, we got some level. G5 is very different because we actually G5 management and LightPath management have known each other for 20 something years. So so it's more like, step cousins reuniting, if you would, or something
Right.
like that. It's which is why the integration of G5 is just so smooth and easy. It's really incredible in that. But it takes some thinking. There isn't one formula that works for everything. But once you think about what are you really trying to find, where are you really trying to make sure that things are going to work, you can typically come up with something that would help with that.
Sure. Sure. How important do you find physical proximity between, the company being acquired and your company to be? Is that a big factor?
It depends on where your synergy is. Again, we focus on the technology and the product offering and the value creation, not on the cost saving, at least as of now when we do acquisitions. So co-locating the operations and merging them physically and the cost saving are a very small part of this always.
Okay.
So at least as of now, that's the case.
Okay.
And definitely for the next few years, they could see it mostly. Unless the company happens to be down the road from here and it's already, nearly co-located, then sure, merging the two into one building makes life much easier.
Right. Yeah, and I was just wondering about like kind of evaluation of the engineering teams, how well they
Yeah.
collaborate with each other and things like that. Does that have to be a in-person process or is that, fine virtually?
At the end of the day, in person is what really makes or breaks. So, but if you're really going to go and develop something together, even before the acquisition, you're going to have some in person time.
Right.
So it's going to happen.
Right. So I'm now talking from the perspective of a contract manufacturer, fabrication shops, machine shops, different providers that would like to get into working with larger companies that want to outsource work to them, that want to help with different aspects of the operation. How many companies do you work with like that?
It's funny, we were just talking about it this morning, and it's amazing how much of our supply chain, and I'm very happy with that, how much of our supply chain are small local companies.
Yep.
So everything needs machined parts,
Right.
and everything needs some secondary processes to them.
Yep.
And even down to painting, we have a company around the corner here that paints enclosures for us, and we have a company out in Ohio that machines carbide for us, things like that. So,
Mm,
at the end of the day, by count of vendors, the vast majority of vendors are small companies. By value, a bit less because they're very high value items, like the detector that goes in a camera. Those are done by very large companies typically.
Right.
So, but yeah, we have a very good mix of that.
So when you let's say it's a machine shop, if you're looking for a new supplier, are you going to be looking for them to be AS 9100 certified, ISO certified, ITAR
ISO for
registered?
sure, ISO certified for sure.
Yep.
AS a bit less critical for us,
Yep.
but I would say that good machine shops that can hold tight tolerances
Yep.
and turn around the product in a fast time.
Mm-hmm.
I would take anyone I'm
Okay.
pretty happy
Yeah.
to work with. There's
Yeah.
never enough of those.
Yeah, I've got a guy down in the Melbourne area. They are AS 9100 certified, ITAR registered.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'd
yeah.
love
Make
I'd
an
love to make
introduction.
yeah,
Sure.
I'd love to make an
Yeah.
introduction. Yeah, great company too. They've got some capacity right now, but they just started working with us about 6-7 months ago with marketing, and they're really excited at the leads that have come in, and we're starting to grow them. So it's cool. But yeah, it's one cool thing about the podcast and my main business is that I have the opportunity to just meet and work with
Sure. Yeah.
hundreds of different manufacturers. So when it comes to literally anything, I probably know somebody that does it. So when you look at a supplier, whether it be fabrication, machining, injection molding, anything that might go into your product, what makes a good relationship there? Like when you look at them, what makes you say, this is a company I want to work with? And what makes you, on the other hand, say, I don't know so much about this guy?
We first evaluate technical capabilities. If we talk about machine shops, we have some parts that have very tight tolerances. So do they even say they can meet those tolerances?
Yep.
Okay. Once they do, now is the question of can they live up to it? So that's not always the same thing, unfortunately. Assuming they have the technical capability to produce what we need and they live up to it and make it, then we really judge on lead time, on price, and on communication. So, the communication part is really important because everyone at some point slips on some lead times. No one has 100% on-time delivery, and with the current, supply chain constraints all around the world related to materials and geopolitics and so on, it gets even worse. So you really get measured then at how well you communicate the situation and what is happening. So a vendor that, calls us 3 weeks in advance and says, hey, I'm having problems, I'm going to be a week late. Okay, at least we can plan for that. A vendor that 5 minutes before the end of the delivery day calls us and says, I'm actually going to be a week late, you get pretty bad points on that because
Right.
you knew you're going to be late a while ago already, or you suspected it. So,
Right.
waiting to the last minute to deliver the news really
No.
cripples our planning, right?
Yep.
Or our, mitigation plans for that.
Yep.
So,
No, and that would be the same for any industry, any business. That's just
sure.
basic human consideration. So if you were to kind of break down sort of your suppliers by manufacturing subsector, what percentage would you say are machining? What percentage would you say are product finishing or injection molding or any other?
I would say materials are a big one. So different types of glass and optical materials.
Mm-hmm.
Machined parts, because everything has machined parts in them.
Yep.
And then the camera detectors, the semiconductor, camera chips, if you would, which only have a very small number of suppliers for that. So it's a very, specific product.
Yep.
But among machining, I mean, we probably have a dozen or so vendors here in the US easily, probably more like 2 dozen of vendors,
Yep.
and we still send stuff overseas sometimes because of speed, not because of cost.
Gotcha.
So it's really frustrating to see that actually we can send something to be made in China and it will, with the travel and all of that, will
Yeah.
come back way ahead faster than any US company would
Yeah,
do.
that's crazy. That
And
is
it's not
crazy.
because of the price that
Yeah.
we do that. Yeah, yeah.
And do you what about like specialty metals? I know
Yeah, we have some very
Inconel
unique
things.
silicon carbide and such that we use, that is very, very specific quality, very specific, spec to it that
Mm,
has to be, measured it has to be held very, very accurately. And actually, there's only one company here in the US, another one in Japan, but we don't buy from the Japan one. So one company here in the US that makes material to that quality and consistency.
that makes the material or machines the material?
Makes the material.
Makes the material. Okay.
Afterwards, there are companies for machining it. Machining carbide is a whole
Yeah.
thing by itself.
Right.
But making carbide of the high purity and qualities that we need.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I don't want to take up too much more of your time because I know you have a lot of
Yeah.
responsibilities on your plate, but I think this is a fascinating conversation. Very, very exciting to get the chance to chat with you and learn kind
Same
of what
here.
your process was, and definitely enjoy it. Appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Good seeing you, Nate, and look forward to see this go live.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.